Welcome to I Love My HBCU ? The podcast where we express our undeniable love for HBCUs, but where we are also not afraid to address a few tough questions. So, sit back, learn a little, love a lot, and rep your HBCU.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's Tosin, host of I Love My HBCU ? We have had Jai Fly Jai. I keep calling you Fly Jai in my head, just so you know. Fly Jai and I have had an amazing conversation that I was like, wait, hold on. No. We need all of this because she's a documentary. And by the time everyone hears her story, you're going to agree. But let's do this the proper way. Jai Ferrell, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks for being my guest, my soror. I'm saying that quietly. My soror. I asked you earlier on because it's well known in your bio, your official bio as the CEO of Girl Scouts Georgia, Girl Scouts of America, Georgia. I said you are 5 generations in Atlanta. And then you did one thing. You panned. If you don't mind panning to that lovely wall again. Yes, please.
Really quickly. And
guys, do you see that? Do you see that wall? Do you see that wall?
So you said 5th generation, and yes, it's crazy. I've been getting accustomed to saying, my name's Jai Ferrell. I'm the CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta, the first Black one in 103 years. So weird. I'm standing in that agency and I'm owning it, but it still seems so unreal to say that. But that's my heritage wall. 5th generations of Atlanteans. My grandmother and grandfather, they relocated to Atlanta with their parents, respectively, mother and father. But they were born in a town called Washington Wilkes County, which is in Georgia, not too far from Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. Spelman didn't have a football team, so I'm an adopted dog for University of Georgia. But my family are descendants of the Drinkards. The Drinkards were slave owners. They were non-Black people. And my big mama, my grandfather's mother, Julia Drinkard, her mother was a slave girl. And she inherited the property. So there is a deed on property that's nearly about 100 acres there that we pay taxes on. But it is called the land of Jim Drinkard Place. So I am able to go directly back to where some of our journey started on this side of the stratosphere. In the way I found out, so random. My pre-Girl Scout life, I was the chief commercial and revenue officer at the busiest airport on the planet, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. No big deal at all. And I saw this gentleman's name on the wall. His name is Jim Drinkard. Didn't think much of it. But I knew Drinkard because my big mama's name is Julia Drinkard. So it was around 4th of July. My mom and myself meet my pop-pop down at the property because we do a walkthrough just to see what everything looks like. He's talking to his brothers. And Uncle Reese, and I said, Uncle Reese is a man named Jim Drinkard that works at my job. I've never seen him before, so I didn't know if he was white or Black or anything like that. But he was a lead engineer there. He did a lot of the work for building some of the buildings and the runways and things like that. And he said, Jim, that's Big Mama's dad's name. And I was like, that's weird. No big deal. Get back to work. We're having a team symposium. Everybody's in there. I'm new, so I'm stand up. My name's Jai, blah, blah, blah. I finally meet Jim Drinkard because he was retiring, and they said his name. So after the show or after the whole presentation, I go over to him and I say, hey, Jim, where are you from? His reply is, you have no idea where I'm from. It's a small town on a speck on top of a speck. I said, no, now I really need to know because the population of Washington Wilkes County is probably 1,100 people. Like, it's tiny. So we start talking, and Jim Drinkard, our family, James Drinkard was his uncle's name. His uncle was the owner of the property. So random. He has books that had pictures of my big mama sitting on the back of like an antique vehicle, which is one of the pictures up here. So it was, I think for me, it was revelational. For him, it might have been a bit of embarrassment because we know how all that works. Yeah. Because in the country, because I'm from Georgia, right? So in the country where we were, there was a set of white kids and a set of Black kids. And they lived on the same track, the same street. So even though I probably won't ever relocate to Washington, Georgia in this lifetime, I pay the taxes of the land and the air property of the estate of Julia Drinkard, because I know that there's blood in that soil that my family, if nothing else, my grandfather deserves to be able to see it. He's the baby. Since we started this process, all of his brothers have passed away. And they were just happy to know that I knew the history. I knew what we were doing. Now, here goes the fun part. The Civil War ended in Washington, Wilkes County. So if you Google the ending where they succeeded, where Robert E. Lee, where they said, we're done with this, we're going to let the slaves just be free, right? It happened where my family's land is. So it's really important to me. So documentary or not, I don't know, but just really cool, really fun fact.
I shared this with you that my entertainment, and I put it in quotes because people's real lives, we call it entertainment because of the medium, not that it is meant to entertain. Sometimes it's just meant to inform. I get that and I respect that. But documentaries, watching documentaries, endless documentaries, is typically my first medium of choice. This isn't I don't know if it is a documentary. This is a story that I pray somebody hears you in conversation with others and comes to you and says, "Fly, Jai Ferrell, can we please do a documentary on your story?" I could literally go quiet for the next 45 minutes and listen to you just talk about that wall and all the stories that connect from that wall. The fact that you get to see all of those people every single day.
Every day I see them. I think, so what's been surreal has been stepping into the agency with the responsibility that in 103 years in Atlanta, Georgia, for the rest of my existence and for the rest of the existence of this amazing organization, that my name and face will be there as the first person of color is beyond. Yeah. And when I think about the people on that wall, I think about what their dreams were for me, and the fact that I'm able to live in this space and take up that space with all of who I am and take them with me every day as I'm getting prepared for work and walking out. It is honorable. And it's also making it very real for me to make sure I'm taking up that space and capacity, but I'm doing good by them.
Yeah.
So that has been a part of this thing, this journey, this stuff, I think, is wow, like being able to do that. And then also my grandfather still being alive, being able to realize that, being able to be in the space with me here. And, you know, I know what they gave up. I know that looking at people like me live the life that I live is not something that when he left Washington, Georgia, when he was a small boy and they relocated here, it's something that they were looking forward to. Also, when I think about my grandmother, she went to Washington High School, not the same Washington, Wilkes County, but Washington High School here in Atlanta, that was the first school for people of color for high school. So we talk about this idea of our history and ancestry and the ancestors and those before us as if it was hundreds of years ago, but it wasn't. I can literally point out a person who was a descendant and or not a shared laborer on property after the Civil War. Like, it's not like it was 100 years ago. Like, I'm talking about somebody whose face is on my wall that I can see, right? And who was captured with a photograph, right? And so I take them with me. And I really hope that I make them proud.
So, Jai, can I tell you why I am hopeful that you get to document this someday? I don't know when this episode is going to air. I don't know if it's going to air close to the amazing elections that we're about to get into. But I do know that right now, Kamala Harris is the Democratic presidential nominee, presumptive Democratic nominee, and I get to speak to a lot of Black students with regards to their vote. And it's been mixed over the last year. So prior to her becoming the presumptive Democratic nominee, it's been very, very mixed. Mm-hmm. Dr. Tosin, we don't see why. Dr. Tosin, this, and they're removed. And it's something you said that brought this train of thought into my head. They're removed from the argument that I hear elders sharing with them, i.e., look at what people gave up, look at the dreams people had for you, and so on and so forth. They're removed from that. And I think the reason why they're removed from it is because they don't get to speak to persons like you. I mean that. Persons like you can persons like you can connect the dots from less than 100 years ago till right now, the chair that you're sitting in, the agency within which you have chosen to assume every single day. I think they need to hear that from somebody that they can see, somebody that they can touch, somebody that they can relate with. So that's why Tosin is hoping that documentary gets made, because it's not far removed for you. It's far removed for some of them because they don't have those linkages that you have. When you were speaking, literally inside my heart, I was like, when the elders talk about the dreams that they had, they're talking about Jai, and they're talking about those dots that can be connected.
It's not too far. So even here in my house, that table, that's my Pop-Pop's table, my grandmother's father's table, my Pop-Pop Jean who kept me when I was little. And what I think, to your point, is the optics. I think technology has been very supportive. Like right now, Tosin, we're able to have this amazing conversation and be in completely different spaces and then share this message. However, oral history is something that we're missing. We're losing languages. We're losing cultural ritual. We're losing the connection to the past. That's one of the things that Spelman did a very great job of with regard to making sure that we were very diasporic, connected, and understanding from whom we came. But also the idea of the written. Like, so my grandmother, when she passed away, I got her Bible. In her Bible, it has birth dates and birth certificates and things like that. So to your point with the students, I realized, and just from social media, they started to colorize older photographs of Martin Luther King. And I think because we see the photo in black and white, it gives this idea of this delayed gap between the connection. But if you're talking about people who were literally born in the early 1900s who are still on this earth, right? And like what that looks like. So to your point, the colorizing of the photo and then being able to see these were real people. These weren't, these aren't hieroglyphics. These are things that are real that weren't hundreds of years ago. To your point, it does connect the gap. There's other things too when it comes to the oral history, and I think it's just the idea of popping peas and sitting in the kitchen with your grandmother. Everybody's so busy being busy that we don't get a chance to have those conversations in that way. And then to be able to understand the dynamic of the environment and those factors when they were growing up. So my grandmother, my mama's mama, grew up in a world where she couldn't go through the front door of certain restaurants in Atlanta, Georgia. Or she couldn't use a water fountain, or her restroom, if she had one, wasn't something that she could be able to use at will and walk through the front door and wash her hands next to a white woman. Or that there are towns that she could not drive through with my grandfather because they were sundown towns. Like, these are not things that are just written in books and it's like, oh, that was nice, and we dismiss those. These are things that are very, very real. So even in the agency of where I hold, and because of my work, and I'm, Girl Scouts is for all girls, I try not to insert my own political conjecture. However, what I will say is, I think that it is beyond beautiful that a little brown girl, a little white girl, a little Hispanic girl, a Jewish girl, a Pacific Island girl can grow up and believe that she can be president. that she could actually believe it, and she could see that there has already been a female vice president. In our lifetimes, Tosin, we got the first black man. And I'm pretty sure when we were young, I remember so vividly being in elementary school voting for Bill Clinton. I remember that was a big deal. And my grandmother loved him because he played the saxophone. And so I, little Jai at that age, 1993, 92, the idea that Kamala could even be something that we're even talking about. Or that Barack Obama even exists. I mean, wow, in my lifetime. So imagine my grandfather who grew up in a segregated America, in a segregated Georgia, in a segregated Atlanta, seeing this accelerated maturation of what could be. It has to be something of awe, for sure, to be able to witness.
I am going to reach back out to you personally. I want to know what his thoughts are at some point in time with regards to these November elections and the fact that there is this black-brown girl that is the presumptive nominee. We don't know where things are going to end, but I'll be curious to hear his thoughts about it.
I remember he told me a story. He was leaving the property at my big mama's house. My big mama was an educator, by the way, Julia, his mother. So they could read, they could write, they could count, they could do all those things. And they call him Sweetie because he was the youngest of them all. And so Sweetie was going out, and I remember he said it was getting dark. They didn't have streetlights, obviously. They barely still have streetlights down there now. And he was on like a dirt road, and he said he remembers he heard this roaring of an engine, and it were these guys who were like, "Hey, Sweetie," and they were calling him, and there were some white guys who had been bullying him, but because he was the youngest, and they called my grandfather and his brothers the Ferrell boys. So the Ferrell boys, you didn't play with the Ferrell boys. And he's the youngest, he's on his way home, and he heard, he said he can tell if it was a gunshot or a backfire from the car, but he's freaking out. And out of nowhere, my Uncle Reese, who is, he was amazing, comes out, and he has his shotgun across his chest, and he was not afraid. And I was like, you stood up to the white boys? He was just like, they're not gonna mess with my family and my brother. And I was like, who are you? He was giving me Malcolm X vibes at the time. But it dawned on me that my grandfather, who could live in one of the most prestigious retirement villages in Atlanta, who can drive a golf cart every day because he don't have, he's retired and lives this life, was also a scared little boy being chased by racist white men in Georgia. It's this dynamic and this duality of being able to exist in both places and what that looks like. And it's very real. I think that's very important, which is why when I am in Atlanta, I am honored by the hallowed ground. A couple weeks ago, we did a ribbon cutting for the first Black Girl Scout troop known as District 5. It was started by Baseline Usher, who is an amazing luminarian, actually the first woman to have an office at City Hall because of all she did. Supported Maynard Jackson and a lot of his initiatives for academia and education. But she started the first Black Girl Scout troop in 1943. So I'm not talking about 100 years ago. I'm talking about 1943. So there is a mural that's on the side of the wall of Atlanta Daily World, which is the first African-American printed newspaper publication in Atlanta. And we did the ribbon cutting there, and it says, "The future is bright." Well, Rosalind Pope is who was featured, and her manifesto while she was at Spelman was just pretty much this declaration of why racism doesn't work in the South and why it doesn't exist. I get to, in my normal day, ride by MLK's house on Sunset down the street from my house. I live in Castleberry Hill, which is about maybe 5 blocks from Spelman. I get to ride by the Freedom District where he is now buried. I pass Ebenezer on a regular basis. Maynard Jackson's son is a friend of mine. You start realizing how amazing in the history of Atlanta is. And so what we started doing was taking field trips. So I take my godkids, because I haven't born any children, but I've raised many. And I'll take them to these places because there are people who come from all over the world who want to come to see where MLK is or come to the King Center. And it's in our backyards. We pass it going to dinner.
Yeah.
You know, I used to live on top of Pascal's, which is where they would meet for their civil rights meetings. So I'm a 41-year-old woman that is 100% immersed in all things that are amazing and Black and beautiful and historic. And I'm 41. And so people keep thinking it's so long ago. No, it's not. And so to your point, I'm proud and I'm grateful to be able to tell these kinds of stories. My big mama finished Spelman in 1949, and she was there when Christine King Ferris and Martin Luther King were there. Like, you know, understanding, like, wow, like these are people that I actually know that are real. And for me to be here and take up this space and this role literally are my ancestors' wildest dreams. I know that because they told them to me, not because I'm making that up at all.
Jai, I could I'm never this quiet. In my personal life, I am quiet, but on the podcast, I'm never this quiet. It's a much more back and forth conversation. I am quiet just listening to you. I am literally hanging on to every single word because, and I'd be saying this if it wasn't you, even though I totally adore you, but the history is so rich. The history is so palpable. The history is so recent. And I think that's what I'm in awe of as I'm listening to you, is it's now. It's sure some is about 50 to 100 years ago, but literally everyone says I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. You can trace yours.
Yeah, they're right there. They're right there. But to your point,
and I think that is beautiful. And dare I say, and please understand my use of envy in the most polite, in the most honorable of ways. I envy that because not a lot of us can speak of that connection in the manner in which you have spoken of that connection, and therefore they say emotions are not always good, but sometimes they are. And then have an emotive connection to it.
Absolutely.
That demands us to live honorable in the manner in which you have described all of the work that you're doing. How could you not? Shame on you if you didn't. Honestly. Because look at how direct that connection is. How could you not?
It is. So the Girl Scout connection for me, first of all, when I got the call from the agency that, you know, I was a candidate that they were looking into, first, and I loved my work at the airport, don't get me wrong. It was amazing. As a matter of fact, it was life-changing. One of my most memorable trips there, because I traveled all over the world. So I've been to India, I've been to, you know, London all the time. I'm always in the UK. I've been to China representing the airport and the city of Atlanta, and just what that looks like, because a part of my job was regional courtship or international and global connectivity, so bringing airlines in and that whole thing. And so the trip that changed my life was going to Namibia. So I went to Namibia, Africa in November, and it was, because Benin has been on my list, and obviously Cape has been on my list, and like, you know, the Joburg, like the ones, but Namibia was so beautiful and so directly tethered to this idea of the diaspora, but they have so much German influence, so I was so curious. Like, so we were in Windhoek, and while we were there, it was this sense of inherent pride that I had an opportunity to experience the ground in which we came, where people literally left and would never come back. And in Benin, there is that place they call the point of no return, right? Where you go and that's where the people were in their alligator and shark infested waters from like the blood and all of that. And so when I sit in my office, and I know that there's never been a person with melanin who sits there, I think about Namibia. I think about my grandmother. I think about my big mama. I think about when I was a Girl Scout in 1991 and 1992 and what they call English Avenue, aka the Bluff here in Atlanta. And that's where my grandmother grew up. And I'm in the basement of my church, which was started in 1912. And my grandmother and everybody is there, and her family and her parents. And I'm learning about the Girl Scout pledge and being honorable and being a good friend and being proud and using my resources well. And knowing that I was a Girl Scout because my big mama, who in 1949 was at Spelman, along with Miss Charlotte Johnson McKenzie, who passed away a couple years ago around COVID, were like, our brown girls deserve Girl Scouts too. And that's how I got in Girl Scouts. I got in Girl Scouts in the basement of my church. And my mother was a co-troop leader. And I've always been a speaker. Like, I always did, the church program. I always had the longest Easter speech. I always did welcomes and you know, courtesy gilding and ushering and all those things. But when I was in Girl Scouts, you know, even then, it wasn't a lot of girls who looked like us. You know, we would go to, like, these service unit trainings or camping even, which I loved, which I'm so excited about because we have 3 campsites in Georgia they total about 1,500 acres, and it's beautiful.
Wow.
But the fact that I'm now the chief executive officer of this thing that in 1991, I was just happy to be able to go to the dance and sell a cookie or get a patch or badge, or it is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I went to an event and I had this woman who was near tears. And Toastin, it freaked me out because, you know, just from an emotional space, and I'm a professional woman, so what are we taught? We don't cry at the workplace. We don't get emotional, right? You know, you got to be Olivia Pope or Michelle Obama, right?
Absolutely.
And she was like, I never would have thought I would have lived to see it. And this wasn't an old woman. And I was like, what? And she wanted to take a picture with me, and she was like, I'm just so proud of you. And I think about that. I think about the fact that I am a Spelmanite. I'm a Spelman woman. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, we would ride by the school to go to church, and my mom and grandma would point over to Spelman and be like, there go your friends. They going to the football game. Your boyfriend's going to go to Morehouse. And, like, it was literally, I was being groomed, if you will. There's a saying that let your first steps be towards Spelman. So and the connection between Spelman and the Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta being the pipeline and the feeder to the first Black Girl Scout troop. I'm like, it's just so serendipitous that only God himself could have organized, orchestrated, and published such an amazing web. And so while I occupy this space, I take them with me. And then I also think about this little girl who favorite song for me was This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine. As a matter of fact, I sing it to myself even now before I do events and things, because that I gotta let my light shine. It's too many people that put into the flame and put their embers into my being for me not to be able to like let that shine, be proud of that. Perfect I am not. I've never said that I was, but proud I am, and I always will be.
I am buying the very first copy. Must be autographed by you. She's laughing, but I'm not joking.
You're so funny, Tosin. Stop it.
But I'm so serious. Once your biography is written, I'm buying the first copy. And you have got to voice it. You've got to do the audio recording of it, because I can hear you.
Oh my God.
Okay. You do. But I really am. So, Jai, I have this thing that I do with everybody that comes on the podcast, and it's called the rapid fire segment. I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you, and you're going to answer them. Okay. And I'm curious to hear what your answers are going to be. I think I could have had harder questions for you at this point, but you've shared so much already that I'm like, she'd answer anything. Okay. I think this is not a fair question to you. You live, breathe, Spelman, that I can, it's going to be honey and sweetness that we hear from this question. But okay, the rapid fire starts now. Okay. Describe your HBCU experience in one word.
Undaunted.
See? If your time in college was a song, A song or a movie? What would it be?
Song or movie? Okay. Song, it would be Optimistic by Sounds of Blackness.
Okay.
And movie, it would be probably Love and Basketball.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. Is there a story you're going to share with us?
Listen, so I was a basketball player my whole life.
Okay.
And in college, I dated a guy in high school that I loved, and he went to Minnesota and played basketball. Then I dated a guy in between there, and he was cool. But I was leaving the Morehouse Clark Atlanta game, and I met the man that I thought was the love of my life.
Okay.
And I think that because I had a big thing with Chris Webber at the time.
Okay.
And the guy looked just like Chris Webber, and he also played Clark Atlanta basketball, and his name was Juan. Shout out to Juan. Juan's married to a Spelmanite, actually. So, hey, Juan. But, and he went to Clark. Y'all, I thought I was going to marry that man. When I tell you, when I say love in basketball, like, I wasn't playing basketball at the time, but I was ready to go back and get on the court if that's what it was going to take to play for his heart. Like, I loved him. So it's so funny now because we're still cool, and like when I see him, and it's all love and stuff, and I'm like, man, I used to love you, but it's so crazy. I learned about this later, and he just told me this a couple of years ago. He came over, he was real big in OCD about like cleaning up and doing stuff. And so like my closet is terrible. It was just always terrible. It's better now, but it was terrible then. And my grandmother, who, mind you, my mom and my grandma lived in the same neighborhood the whole time I grew up. So I would see my grandmama every day. Like that's just what we did. He came over to do something. He was helping me organize. But my grandma was like, let me talk to Juan for a minute. So I go upstairs, I mind my business. I now know that conversation because Juan was older. I was a freshman at the time. Juan was like a super senior. Like I think he was like trying to figure it out. You know how they play basketball, go to junior college and all that.
Of course, yes.
And my grandmother said, I like you, but you're going to have to let her go. And he was like, what? And she was like, you are not good enough for her. And where she is going, she can't take you. So I couldn't understand. A couple weeks after that, Juan started getting real funny acting. Like, you know, mind you, I graduated high school at 17. I was turning 18. So, like, I couldn't drink. I couldn't do a lot of that stuff that everybody was doing because I was always a year behind them from year-wise, age-wise. And Juan told me this. He was just like, your grandmother had always told me that you were so special. That because Juan was like trying to settle down and get married, and he was talking about babies and stuff, and I was like, no, like, you know, because I'm a freshman, I'm at Spelman, I'm figuring out my life. He's 22, somewhere around there, trying to figure it out. I'm 18, 19, you know, and she's like, no, like her life is no. And so he later told me, and I'm gonna make sure I share this episode with him. He was just like, you were so beautiful, you were so smart. And your grandmother's plan for you was so refined that there was no place for me. And shortly after that, he went and played basketball in Puerto Rico. Mind y'all, this is before FaceTime, Zoom, Skype. Like, it was like literally writing letters and hoping that the phone would work because we were still waiting on our minutes to be free after 9 o'clock. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, it wasn't like now if I'm dating somebody overseas. And he left, and it was over. And I asked him, I was like, you broke my heart. You had me looking crazy. That's when Monica had that song out, So Gone Over You. I was nuts. Oh, my God. I was losing my mind. And I was like, a matter of fact, my professor, Mr. Paul Thomason, Mrs. T, I loved him. Mrs. T was like, baby girl, because I was in theater studies, and I was an art minor. And took a lot of theater and art class. And Mr. T, we were painting. There was a Yoka Chinzero was doing a play. Love her. Amazing filmmaker and playwright. But I was painting the floor black inside of the freaking theater. And I was going through it. And Mrs. T was like, what? He has a nickname for everybody. My name was Ferrello. I don't even know if he knows my real name. And so, but he does because I text him, I check on him all. He just retired not too long ago. So, and that's how, by the way, that's how small Spelman is. I still know my professors. Like I can call, even though Dr. Gail was not there when I was there, I can text her. I know all of my people, right? And so he said, Ferrello, let me tell you something about life, baby. I'll never forget it. He says, even if you marry, even if you have kids, everybody needs their own island. He said, love is a boat. Relationships are boats. You take that boat and you sail to that other person's island and you let them sail back on yours. But baby, you keep your own island. And so I'm freaking out because I'm like, what are you talking about? How can you tell? Mind you, Ruby D was there because we were doing this. It was called Flying Over Purgatory. You were just bringing back all this. Flying Over Purgatory was what we were working on. And so we were blacking out the black box. Ayoka Chinzera was decorating it. The girl who played the mom in Ray, of the little Ray boy on the movie Ray with Jamie Foxx, her name was Salome. I don't know how I remember all this stuff now. You're bringing it to me. But anyway, so I'm like, Ruby D is in my atmosphere. You know, all these people are there. And he told me, he was like, love is a boat, but you keep your own island. And baby, what you doing is you making your island that man island. You get on a boat and you go to his island and you let him come to your island on a boat, but you keep your island. And that was what, 2001, 2002? I've never forgotten about my island. Now, I might become a little dismayed in relationships in the past. I'm in a great domestic partnership now. I love Malcolm. But I'll never forget him telling that to me because I was so hurt. What I did not know was that my grandma Rosa had already orchestrated that this man was going to leave me alone because she had plans, right? She had things she wanted me to do. And so I think I'm now there where I'm like, my grandmama, her dreams, she already knew, like, no, you got stuff to do. And all this, want to be married and all this stuff early, no, you got stuff to do. And so it goes back to those ancestors' dreams for you. And sometimes you got people praying over and for you that you don't know nothing about. And so now when he tells me this, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe my grandmother told you to leave me alone.
I love that you guys are still friends. That's number one, so friendly.
Cool. We're so cool.
Yes, I love that. But I also I have this thing that we totally bastardized the 67 seconds, by the way, but that's my fault, not yours. But I also love, I have this saying, I keep going back and forth. I have this saying whereby there are no mistakes in life. Mm-hmm. And as I listened to your story, I actually wrote down, love is a boat, but you keep your own island. As I listen to every single thing you've said, literally, all I keep walking away with, there are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. That is so beautiful. Wow. And this all comes from Love and Basketball being the
Love
movie.
and Basketball, girl. I'm going to call when we get this. Like, I just talked about you in my podcast.
You have to. You have to. You have too many to pick from. Who was your favorite professor in college?
Okay, I'll give you two. Mr. Thomason, who I just talked to you about, because that's my guy. But Akua McDaniel. Akua McDaniel was the art history professor at Spelman while I was there. And she was brilliant. She still is around. She retired. But she was the one who I learned about Sart G. Bartman from. So everything in Spelman's kind of your core class or core-based coursework is required to be embedded in some type of African diaspora or about women. So if you took, I took science because I wasn't a pre-med major or anything like that, but as a part of your base coursework, it was interdisciplinary science and it focused on sickle cell. Why? Because sickle cell and its impact of the Black community. So in this intro to African-American artists, our African-American women in art, we talked about, Fannie Lou Hamer and like all these people and, Faith Ringgold, who she just passed away, but I learned about her there in that class. But Dr. McDaniel, first of all, she was fierce. And we had to do these ideas of this iconography of like the Black female form and the Black body. And this is back when like the video vixen was like a really big thing. And and so she taught me about Sart G. Bartman and Sarah Bartman, and for depending upon where you are. And we talk about, which is interesting because it's this idea of the disproportionate glorification of the Black female form. I could talk about that all day. I won't on this call. But I learned about the fact that this woman was kept in a cage, and because of her voluptuous form, she was put on display in circuses. And her body at her death was dissected to see if we were different than our counterparts. And matter of fact, we're talking about, again, art, because the form was, we were comparing current and modern art day forms to previous ones. And Dr. McDaniel, she woke something up in me to understand this idea of iconography and imagery and the optics of the Black female form and what that looks like through art and through music. And so it just made me more conscious. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my Killer Mikes. Michael Render's a really good friend of mine. Tip, Clifford Harris. I mean, I'm giving you all the Atlantas. But I paid more attention. And Lord forbid we talk about Nelly's tip drill, because I was a part of that whole thing where we stopped him from coming on campus. And I think I probably still would have stopped him coming on campus now, just knowing what we knew, a part of that movement. But I realize the importance of that now. Because remember, when we were in school, we didn't have social media and things like that.
Absolutely.
Facebook actually came out my senior year in college, and I didn't even have a Facebook page then. I was happy they let me keep my Spelman.edu site, because when Facebook first opened, you had to have .edu to be on it. And so, Akua McDaniel changed my life. And I don't think I've ever told her that, actually. I probably should, but I don't think I ever told her that. I tried to connect with her on LinkedIn, but she's retired, living her best life, child. So, but I'm gonna see if I can find her. But her and Dr. T, those were the two that I was like, I would stay late, I would get there early just to be in their presence, because they were so smart. Mind you, my largest class at Spelman may have been 30 people.
Nice.
So I could, and that was my science class, because that was required and mandated. Yeah, I had a worst professor. She knows she's my worst professor too, but we're better now. My worst professor. Yeah, we'll talk about her later.
As I listen to you, every time I have an alum on, I say sometimes that I love my HBCU ? Is a love letter to current HBCU students.
It is.
And every time I hear persons like you speak of their professors, I'm hopeful for the current ones and the interesting relationships that I see them have with their professors, and them not realizing. You literally just said, I wonder if I've told her that that's the impact that she had on me. That you don't know it now to all the current students at HBCUs and other colleges, but this is for HBCU students. You don't know it now, the impact that these persons are going to have on your life. You don't even know the stories that you're going to tell later on, because it's upon reflection that you're going to realize, wow, that's what that impact was. You live, I mean, gosh, anyone watching is going to see the frames that you have on together with the matching blazer. So you live and breathe Spelman blue. This was not intentional. I happen to be wearing blue. It is not Spelman blue.
It absolutely is Spelman blue. It's undaunted blue.
It's undaunted blue. There was no other choice but you selecting Spelman College to go to school.
Absolutely.
That's very clear to me.
That was it for me.
That was so. I'm not even going to ask you what the college selection journey was. I typically ask people, what was your college selection journey?
Oh, I don't mind. I played basketball. So I had done I don't know if they do it now, but you had to do like this whole NCAA clearinghouse. I was an AAU basketball player. I think I was fairly decent. I was all team DeKalb County and all this stuff, and I was highly rated.
She said fairly decent. Did you hear that? Fairly decent.
You know what? Shout out to Angel Reese, because she's a bad girl, but we didn't have that. I mean, we had Lisa Leslie, Rebecca Lobo. We did have Dawn Staley and a couple of them. But, you know, they were also trying to be models and basketball players, because the compensation wasn't even comparable enough. I don't even think it is now, actually, to be fair. And so, like, being a basketball player wasn't something that was going to be, like, the next step in my life.
The thing.
Like, that wasn't it. And at one point, I wanted to be an OBGYN, but then I decided, I was like, I don't want to do that all day and be in, like, women's private areas all day long. Like, I just, you know. And so, when we started looking at college, my mom went to Georgia State University, and then she took some time off and then went back after my grandma passed and after I was out of college. But GSU was like, yeah, man. And she worked there for 27 years. So she was like, oh, go to GSU. Go to school for free. Get a Hope Scholarship. Don't pay for school. But I told you, when we would leave, because my grandmother and grandfather, they called it white flight, which is when black people were moving, following the white folks back to the suburbs, leaving Atlanta proper, the city. And so I grew up in Decatur. And Decatur, literally, 86 Lithonia to Decatur Outcast, that my mother used to check. She used to catch the 86 Lithonia bus when she was in the car. So, like, I'm all things Atlanta, right? And so...
You are.
I remember when we would drive into church, because on Saturdays, it would be choir rehearsal, and it would be Girl Scout troop meetings. Or my grandmother, who was on the Courtesy Guild, would be, like, putting together books or doing the programs or whatever those things were. So when we would drive, we would get off on Lee Street. The exit of Lee Street is where Morehouse School of Medicine sits, Spelman sits in the Nook, and Morehouse right there. My church is literally 6 minutes from that campus. My house is 4 minutes from that campus now. My church is that close to me now. And when we would get off the exit, my grandmother would intentionally ride by Spelman so that I could see the sign and she could point out, there go your friends. There you guys go. So when it came down to picking a college, in my head, I was like, that's where I'm going to school. My big mama went there. My my big mama, her husband went there. He went to Morehouse. So, like, this was a part of the thing for me, right? Like, this is where I'm going to school. So when it came time, my mom was like, ooh, University of Georgia. I told you my family's from Athens, so, like, right around Athens. So they're like, oh, that's great. I'm not going there. It was too big. I was thrown off when they still had a black UGA homecoming. I was like, why gotta have a black? Like, I was like, that freaked me out. And then the school just seemed too big. I didn't want to go. I had an opportunity to go to Furman University on full scholarship. I was a decent basketball player, and they wanted me. Florida Atlantic International wanted me to come there. Tulane was interested, and I was like, I don't. And I'm gonna tell you, loving basketball, I was like, I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning running around. So I was over it, because again, there is no Angel Reese story here, right? So it's like that's not a thing. So my mother, Spelman sends you your pre-admissions letters, and they come in these big Spelman blue envelopes. I'm at home. I used to do hair and stuff, so, like, I know how to braid and everything. But I remember I came home from the hair salon, and I love them too, because those were like my big sisters in the salon. I learned so much about being a woman from them. But I came home from the salon. My best friend, who is still my best friend to this day, we met in elementary school, actually. We were in a gifted program, but we went to different schools, but we all got together to go gifted program stuff. Me and Nicole left the salon. We're at home. The mail is coming. Nicole's sister, Lanisha, who's like the big sister to all, she went to Spelman too. So she was already in Spelman at the time. She was in her junior year. Yeah. So it's where we wanted to go to school. Girl, those envelopes came. Mind you, ain't no Facebook now. So it ain't like you can go, oh, my envelope came. My grandmother and my grandmother used to love going to eat and just hang out. So they were out eating. I want to say they were either at Longhorns or Cheddar's or somewhere like that. I can't think of the name of the place. And my blue envelope came. And so I'm opening it up. And mind you, I'd already gotten into University of Georgia. I'd already gotten into West Georgia, all those schools, Georgia State. And so my mom's like, because if you go to Georgia, a public school in Georgia, you get if you have the grades, you get a full scholarship. It's called the Hope Scholarship. So they thinking, okay, we good. Girl, that Spelman envelope came. I called my mama, and her and my grandmama were out together, and I was screaming to the top of my lungs. She was happy. But I later learned the first thing she did was cry, because she was like, how am I going to afford to pay for school?
Oh, wow.
And so she was like, I can't tell her that's not where she's going. So she made 2 phone calls. One of them was to my big mama, Eloise Holloway, who finished in 1949, who was my Girl Scout troop leader. And big mama was like, it's going to be fine. We're going to get it paid for.
Why am I about to cry? Oh my gosh.
And 2 was to my grandmother's godson, who is now known across the globe. But his name is Craig Oliver, but he's my uncle. He's my grandmother's godson. He's the pastor of Elizabeth Baptist Church, a huge church here in Atlanta, and he has other locations in other states. And she called Uncle Craig, and he was like, don't worry about it. We're going to get it done. And so I did not know this at the time, because I'm ecstatic. I'm happy. I'm going to school. You don't go. I know some people make the choice because they can't afford and affordability, and that goes back to this whole idea of the HBCU and how we can afford it. And I do think we can do a better job of closing that gap. But it also starts with a culture of philanthropy, and we'll talk about that later. But that's why I was going to school. So I didn't have, in my head, there was no other choice. When I finished Tosin, I didn't have loans. I have no idea. And I told my mom, we watched Set It Off a couple weeks ago. I said, was you doing what Frankie was doing for me to go to school? Because I was like, how were you doing that?
Wow.
And, like, how are you paying for me to go to school? I mean, I had a couple, but like and there was this thing that went viral a couple weeks ago that was like how we don't teach our urban students how to get scholarships and apply. My high school was great. Don't get me wrong. My mom and dad went to Southwest Academy. It was an awesome school, but we didn't teach our students how to apply. You know, you had the big Bill and Melinda Gates, I think, from the Gates Foundation. You had a couple, and you had hope, but like I wasn't applying for scholarships because I was tall. I didn't know that was even a thing. I wasn't applying for AKA scholarships, or I didn't do any of that. And I know better now, so I pass that information off to people that I get.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, have you signed up? There are even tons of different apps that you can sign up for now where you can do all in one of applications and applying, and then you even get your fees waived. Because I was afraid of all of that. Like, I don't have $25 every time or $50 every time I want to drop an app.
Yeah.
Or so I'm learning, like, there was so much that we were in the dark of. But I knew about basketball stuff because we touted athletics. I mean, that was just a part of it, right? And so I'm like, man, I didn't know that. So when I try to tell people about the HBCU experience, I'm like, yes, get your house in order. You know, make sure, go where you want to go. Because I get that a lot, too. I have friends whose kids want to go to Spelman. They're like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, go where she wants to go so that she can be successful. Because if she chooses where you want her to go, she'll have resentment for you for the experience she did not gain if that's what she wanted to do. I'm not saying go be crazy and be stupid and, you know, throw money at the wall. But I do think in order to be set up for success, you have to put people in environments where their heart and their passions are. And Spelman was just always there for me. It was never a question of if, it was when.
It was when.
It was when, honey. It was when. I was going to school there.
It was when. I can't believe I almost didn't ask you what the college, because I was like, oh, she already knew she was going to go. But you...
I did.
I'm learning. You have a story for every single thing. And have you noticed I've just been quiet listening? I will listen to your stories all day long.
My mother was going to get a part-time job to work in the bookstore so I can go to school. Like, she is the real MVP, y'all. Like,
she is.
She would... I don't know. And now I realize. So we had a Nissan Sentra when we were growing up. Before that, we had a little small Corolla, and it had leather seats and no tent. So, girl, we used to be hot in the car. I remember this. Because my mother was a teen mom. She was 17 when I was born. And so that was a whole other thing itself, too. I'm sure you'll get to that. But I remember I would look in the backseat of her car, and she had a makeshift bar. And she had uniforms. So she had a white and blue one for when she worked for the Atlanta Braves games. She had a red one for the Atlanta Hawks games. She had a brownish one for the Atlanta Thrashers. Atlanta had a hockey team back then. And then she had this gray suit that she would wear at the Omni when she was concierge. And she had a little black book. And in her book, it would be like, okay, I'm working the Braves Phillies game this day. I'll be at the stadium for the Tina Turner concert. I'll be concierge for this other event. So she literally part-timed her way through my life. So when I became an adult, a couple things I did. One was I pay her car insurance. She'll never pay it in her life. And she wants a car, so I'll probably just get another car too. We're BMW girls. But she deserves it because I remember her carrying me and my book bag on the 86 of Lithonia so she can get downtown. So if I gotta pay that, and it was this crazy steep hill in our neighborhood at the time, and she would walk this thing every single day. And then when she wasn't doing that, she would be a Santa Claus elf at South DeKalb Mall for the black Santa Claus that was there, because we had a black Santa when I was growing up. So when I think about like the sacrifices that my mother has made for me to be here, if that means that she deserves to get a nice handbag, she's going to get it. If that means that she's going to drive a nice vehicle, she absolutely is, because I know what she went through for me to sit in this space. So yeah, girl, I don't know how she paid for me to go to school. That's why I was like, Mama, were you like Frankie? Like, was you doing that stuff on Set It Off? And she was like, are you crazy, girl? But,
are you crazy?
I had to Yes. But she was like, girl, I was going to get a bookstore job. I was going to work in a cab.
Wow.
I was going to do whatever it was going to be able to. She even asked me a switchboard operator. She was like, whatever it could take, if I got to go work up there for you to go part-time or figure it out, you're going to that school. Yes.
Your mom is the real MVP, quite literally.
She's
quite
a real
literally.
One. She's a real
Wow. Wow. Jai, what's your favorite thing? This is such an unfair question for her. What's your favorite thing about being a Spelman alum?
My favorite thing about being a Spelman alum, I have so many favorite things. You know, it's my 20th and my reunion coming up, actually.
Congratulations.
I know, I'm so excited. Like, my old head. I could go into a different tent at homecoming.
Oh, my God.
I will say the prestige of our sisterhood. I went to a college where I could be walking into a building and Pearl Clegg could be exiting from teaching a class. Or Spike Lee would be on campus eating a sandwich just randomly. I went to an institution where greatness is in the fiber of the very cobblestone on the sidewalk. And we have this thing, many apply but few are chosen, and that's the truth. There's a very competitive process. I am happy to see the increase of individuals applying to HBCUs. I think that is amazing. I'm happy to see that people are making the choice to choose this institution. Because don't get me wrong, I went to Spelman for undergrad, graduate school, Georgia State University, and my executive leadership programming was at Harvard. So I've seen the spectrum of like educational institutions in academia. But my Spelman family, even girls who I might not have been cool with in school because of whatever reason, the fiber of what we have now, I mean, I can't even imagine what my life would be like without them. But not only that, Spelman itself, in its short form, I mean, it's what, how many characters? Maybe 7? Spelman. What that means, it stands for honorable, elite. It stands for qualitative. And so you can, and I'm being so honest, when I was at Turner, when I was at the airport, I could tell the Spelman interns. I knew who they were from how they showed up, from their wear, their gear, their dress, their vibe, their productivity, their output. I just knew that they were Spelman women. And like, you could literally pick them out. You just knew, right? You just knew. And when I say I went to Spelman, the weight that it carries is like, you and so you went to Spelman. Like it's like, you know that, I mean, honestly, when I was in my freshman class, it might have been 515 girls. When we graduated, it may have been 400. My high school was bigger than Spelman. I just told you my largest class was 30 people.
30 people.
And so, like, you talking about knowing your professors? Let me tell you something. HBCU kids, young adults, people, collegiates, whatever you want to be called, connect with them. I can call professors right now and say, hey, I'm looking for X. Or do you know? Or I'm doing my announcement for a new historic appointment. Oh, you want to come do it at Spelman? I did my announcement. We did the release of the announcement for me becoming the first CEO at Spelman.
Isn't that amazing?
That's where media met us, at Spelman, on those grounds. So, like, connect with them. These people are wealths of knowledge. And then when you start realizing who your professors are, you're like, oh, like, these people are well written. I see people who were professors when I was at Spelman now that are like at the NYUs and the Harvards and at these prestigious institutions, and they started at Spelman. Like, and it is fascinating. And then your president can actually know your name, like know who you are. It's not like, oh, you see them at the ceremonious events or commencement or things like that. Like, your president's like, hey, Jai. Like, what?
No, seriously.
It's unreal.
Seriously.
It's unreal.
Seriously. Jai, you are a busy human being. I respect every single second that we have spent together. I get the sense that if your assistant would allow, we could be on this call for the next 2.5 hours.
Yeah, Miss Gina doesn't play, girl. She's like, we could be, but I'm going to tell you why this was a priority for me. And, let me also say the power of networking. I didn't know Tosin before somebody, maybe Chris, went into the inbox and DM'd, and then they DM'd back. And so that's how we hear. So, thank you to Instagram. The reason this is important is because I don't always get to go into rooms where there are people who look like me. For a very long time throughout my career, I've either been the only woman, the only person of color, sometimes the youngest, depending upon where I am. And I always try to make sure that I'm setting myself up to be to someone what I would have needed when I was coming into this space. And so I always try to make time for the HBCUs, for my institutions, because the next CEO of Girl Scouts of the global universe could be listening. The next Kamala could be listening. The person who's just, the next educator who just like, I just want to help kids could be listening. And they're making a decision, and I actively made the choice to change the world by attending Spelman. I wholeheartedly believe that me being a person who is proud of who I am, that was reinforced and reaffirmed when I got to Spelman. It let me know that there was a place for me, and that it was okay for me to be 100% myself, and I didn't have to be nobody else. Because there are hundreds of women who are just like you, who are as amazing as you are, and it's okay for you to be authentically you. One of my final exercises at Spelman was in convocation, graduating. You look to your left, you look to the right, and they're like, you guys will never be in this space again in this way, ever again. And it's true. But in that room, I see some of my Spelman classmates. They are physicians, neuroscientists, oral dental surgeons, elected officials, educators, business folks, celebrity. I mean, you name it. And I'm like, it was in that room with me. So you know what it was a reminder of? Who I was. Like, you're in a room with people who are just like you. And you know what? We were set up for success. Your professors are going to think they're going to hate you. They don't hate you. They want you to be the best you. And it was hard for me to understand that. So that goes back to my professor I hated the most, Opal Moore. I love her now. I hated her then. I hated her then because my teacher decided to go on tour for Comic View. I'm not lying. Freshman year, English seminar. His name was Ray. I can't remember his last name. But he decided a couple weeks before class was supposed to start that he wasn't coming back, that he was going to go on tour. Come view. I'm not lying. I know you think I'm playing, but I'm for real.
I just love this.
And so she was the chair of the department. Okay. She had to teach us. Her name was Opal Moore. Tosin, she hated us so much. We're freshmen. We're just finishing learning about syntax and 5-paragraph essays and like research and all that kind of stuff. And we're still doing microfiche and LexisNexis. So she's like, I am teaching a class filled with 17 and 18-year-olds because we were freshmen. She hated us so much. And she was my first B-. I had a C. And I've never gotten a C in my life. So I was devastated. Like, I thought I was going to flunk out and I was going to end up like Lisa Bonet on The Cosby Show. It was just real bad. And so I'll never forget. So she was giving us opportunities to like redo our papers and stuff. She just hated us. She was just real heavy-handed with the pen.
Oh my God.
She I don't know what happened to her this day, but she was having a real bad day. And so she put in a C-. She was like, your grade is a C+. And I was like, that is unacceptable. Like, I am protesting. I'm reporting you to the president's office. Like, are you crazy? And so long and short of it, she had given me what was called an incomplete because she called herself giving me an opportunity to make up for the grade. Well, the problem was my scholarships and the money that my mom and them had to pay was based off of what my GPA was.
Absolutely.
So my mama called Opal Moore, child. Opal Moore told her, Jai needs to learn how to advocate for herself. She said, well, you call Jai when y'all want this tuition paid. So So I finished the paper, all this stuff. Mind you, we were in what is now the Camille Olivia Hanks Cosby Auditorium, is where Camille Cosby, who was a Spelman alumna. Y'all, Tosa, she would be walking to the elevator. I would be pushing the close button like so that she would not be terrible, but I would. Fast forward to my junior year. Junior year, I get selected for the Phi Beta Kappa Society. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's one of the most prestigious academic honor societies, and it's a very small group of people. So I'm a Phi Beta Kappa alum as well. And guess who is the Phi Beta Kappa sponsor? Opal Moore.
Opal Moore.
Girl, she called my name. We walk across the stage. We have a handshake thing, and she gives me a hug, and she's like, I knew you could do it. I looked at her, and if I could have pushed her off that stage, I was like, you hated me. So shout out to Opal Moore. She's going to hear about this. But
and I love this. I love this story. I love this. Your assistant, if your assistant is listening, whether Jai wants to or not, you guys have got to start writing her biography, autobiography. Tosin is going to be the first to get a copy. I love these stories.
My friend actually owns a company called Booksley. I'm giving him a shameless plug too. He owns his name is AJ Joyner, and it's called Booksley, and what it does is it accelerates the process for writing a book. So he's all over. It's a technology that he's enabled. He has people, he has AI, he has all these things. But what's great about it is he can take an idea from framework to publish in a very firm amount of time. So the reason I'm telling you that is because AJ's been on me for like...
Thank you, AJ.
Forever.
Thank you. I was literally going to tell you that I've written AJ's name down.
Too. He's an alum. He went to Southern. So
I am going to reach out to AJ. AJ, keep on her. Keep on her. We need her book. We need her book.
I'm going to tell him. I'm going to say, you know what? One, I want you to meet Tosin because he went to Southern. He's very brilliant. And he's an HBCU alum as well. But like he's like, are you taking down these stories? So I will tell you, shameless plug, I do have an outline of something that would be a book, but they're just my random thoughts. So we'll figure it out.
Okay. But I'm looking forward to reading it no matter what.
Okay, wonderful.
So last question, Jai. And please end this episode for us by giving our audience, although you've given so much, but I still want to hear how you're going to encapsulate this in one word or short phrase why you love HBCUs. Not just Spelman now.
All of them.
All of them.
I learned at an HBCU that it was important to, one, love myself and love all of who I was. And it was okay to be that. But that someone, somewhere, past or future, is waiting on you to show up and you to be your authentic self so that they could be their authentic selves.
Wow.
And that's what I learned at an HBCU.
Wow. I'm going to... You're giving credit to the HBCUs, and I appreciate you for that. But from everything that I've heard you say today, I also have to give credit to every single person on that wall of yours for also giving you that. Jai Ferrell, you are 41 years old. You shared that on the episode, so I'm
proud of that. I look good.
She's proud. She looks amazing. But the reason why I wanted to bring that back, you are a 41-year-old CEO of Girl Scouts Greater Atlanta. I'm sure enough people have told you they're proud of you. We're proud of you. We appreciate you for being. We appreciate you for being the authentic you that challenges some of us to make sure we also step in our authentic selves. I appreciate your time. I have loved every single second. It is impossible, I think, for anyone to see this episode and not like this episode because of you. And I hope it also encourages them to subscribe to I Love My HBCU ? Wherever they get their podcast. Jai, It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to occupy this space. And you got a new cousin now, honey. We're related
No,
now.
listen, we are sorors. So you're my sister, not my cousin.
You absolutely are. And that is all on 1908. Thank you for correcting me.
That is all on 1908. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to I Love My HBCU ? Let's keep the conversation going as we share our stories and encourage more practical support of HBCUs, whilst of course holding each other accountable. Don't forget to follow and subscribe for the latest episodes. Until next time, love and lift your HBCU.